Chapter 5 and 6 of Book 8 of Les Misérables, Volume 4 by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Patricia Hayes. Les Misérables, Volume 4 by Victor Hugo. Translated by Isabel Florence Hapgood. Book 8, Enchantments and Desolations. Chapter 5, Things of the Night. After the departure of the ruffians, the Rue Plumet resumed its tranquil nocturnal aspect. That which had just taken place in this street would not have astonished a forest. The lofty trees, the copses, the heaths, the branches rudely interlaced, the tall grass exist in a sombre manner. The savage swarming there catches glimpses of sudden apparitions of the invisible. That which is below man distinguishes, through the mist, that which is beyond man. And the things of which we living beings are ignorant there meet face to face in the night. Nature, bristling and wild, takes alarm at certain approaches in which she fancies that she feels the supernatural. The forces of the gloom know each other and are strangely balanced by each other. Teeth and claws fear what they cannot grasp. Blood-drinking bestiality, voracious appetites, hunger in search of prey, the armed instincts of nails and jaws which have for source and aim the belly, glare and smell out uneasily the impassive spectral forms straying beneath the shroud, erect in its vague and shuddering robe, and which seem to them to live with the dead and terrible life. These brutalities, which are only matter, entertain a confused fear of having to deal with the immense obscurity condensed into an unknown being. A black figure, barring the way, stops the wild beast short. That which emerges from the cemetery intimidates and disconcerts that which emerges from the cave. The ferocious fear the sinister. Wolves recoil when they encounter a ghoul. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6. Marius becomes practical once more to the extent of giving Cosette his address. While this sort of a dog with a human face was mounting guard over the gate, and while the 6 ruffians were yielding to a girl, Marius was by Cosette's side. Never had the sky been more studded with stars and more charming, the trees more trembling, the odor of the grass more penetrating. Never had the birds fallen asleep among the leaves with a sweeter noise. Never had all the harmonies of universal serenity responded more thoroughly to the inward music of love. Never had Marius been more captivated, more happy, more ecstatic. But he had found Cosette sad. Cosette had been weeping. Her eyes were red. This was the first cloud in that wonderful dream. Marius's first word had been, "What is the matter?" And she had replied, "This." Then she had seated herself on the bench near the steps, and while he tremblingly took his place beside her, she had continued, "My father told me this morning to hold myself in readiness, because he has business, and we may go away from here." Marius shivered from head to foot. When one is at the end of one's life, to die means to go away. When one is at the beginning of it, to go away means to die. For the last 6 weeks, Marius had little by little, slowly by degrees, taken possession of Cosette each day. As we have already explained, in the case of first love, the soul is taken long before the body. Later on, one takes the body long before the soul. Sometimes one does not take the soul at all. The Faublas and the Prudhommes add, because there is none. But the sarcasm is, fortunately, a blasphemy. So Marius possessed Cosette, as spirits possess, but he enveloped her with all his soul, and seized her jealously with incredible conviction. He possessed her smile, her breath, her perfume, the profound radiance of her blue eyes. the sweetness of her skin when he touched her hand, the charming mark which she had on her neck, all her thoughts. Therefore, he possessed all Cosette's dreams. He incessantly gazed at, and he sometimes touched lightly with his breath the short locks on the nape of her neck, and he declared to himself that there was not one of those short hairs which did not belong to him, Marius. He gazed upon and adored the things that she wore, her knot of ribbon, her gloves, her sleeves, her shoes, her cuffs, as sacred objects of which he was the master. He dreamed that he was the lord of those pretty shell combs which she wore in her hair. And he even said to himself, in confused and suppressed stammerings of voluptuousness which did not make their way to the light, that there was not a ribbon of her gown, not a mesh in her stockings, not a fold in her bodice, which was not his. Beside Cosette, he felt himself beside his own property, his own thing, his own despot and his slave. It seemed as though they had so intermingled their souls that it would have been impossible to tell them apart had they wished to take them back again. This is mine. No, it is mine. I assure you that you are mistaken. This is my property. What you are taking as your own is myself. Marius was something that made a part of Cosette, and Cosette was something which made a part of Marius. Marius felt Cosette within him. To have Cosette, to possess Cosette, this to him was not to be distinguished from breathing. It was in the midst of this faith, of this intoxication, of this virgin possession, unprecedented and absolute, of this sovereignty, that these words, "We are going away," fell suddenly at a blow, and that the harsh voice of reality cried to him, "Cosette is not yours." Marius awoke. For 6 weeks Marius had been living, as we have said, outside of life. Those words, "going away," caused him to re-enter it harshly. He found not a word to say. Cosette merely felt that his hand was very cold. She said to him in her turn, "What is the matter?" He replied in so low a tone that Cosette hardly heard him. "I did not understand what you said." She began again. "This morning my father told me to settle all my little affairs and to hold myself in readiness, that he would give me his linen to put in a trunk, that he was obliged to go on a journey, that we were to go away, that it is necessary to have a large trunk for me and a small one for him, and that all is to be ready in a week from now, and that we might go to England." "But this is outrageous!" exclaimed Marius. It is certain that at that moment no abuse of power, no violence, not one of the abominations of the worst tyrants, no action of Busiris, of Tiberius, or of Henry VIII. Could have equalled this in atrocity, in the opinion of Marius. Monsieur Fauchelevent taking his daughter off to England because he had business there. He demanded in a weak voice, "When do you start?" He did not say when. "And when shall you return?" He did not say when. Marius rose and said coldly, "Cosette, shall you go?" Cosette turned toward him her beautiful eyes, all filled with anguish, and replied in a sort of bewilderment, "Where?" "To England. Shall you go?" "Why do you say you to me? I ask you whether you will go." "What do you expect me to do?" she said, clasping her hands. "So you will go? If my father goes, so you will go?" Cosette took Marius' hand and pressed it without replying. "Very well," said Marius. "Then I will go elsewhere." Cosette felt rather than understood the meaning of these words. She turned so pale that her face shone white through the gloom. She stammered, "What do you mean?" Marius looked at her, then raised his eyes to heaven and answered, "Nothing." When his eyes fell again, he saw Cosette smiling at him, the smile of a woman whom one loves, possesses of visible radiance, even at night. How silly we are! Marius, I have an idea." "What is it?" "If we go away